How's it going, everybody? How the hell are you? Welcome back to the Nerdy Jock. Do me a favor, hit the like button, smack the subscribe so you always know when the new videos are coming out. Today, we're getting into some of that nerd stuff. I have not talked about the Rings of Power for a very good reason. Mostly because there's a lot of stuff out there that annoys the crap out of me. But I'm going to get into it today, and I'm going to try and be calm and civil about it. But for the most part, the things I have read, most of you are stupid. That's fine. We've noticed that a lot of the world is stupid. It's become a very big fact. All right, so the Rings of Power came out, and I watched all of them, and I loved it. Loved the series, loved all the characters, loved the story in general. I know that, it's not canon, because none of that is, and if you didn't know that, now you do. Even J.R.R. Tolkien, none of that. The only thing that is canon in anything that is Lord of the Rings is the Lord of the Rings, the book, the 3 books, all, the movies, and The Hobbit. That's it. Everything else, J.R.R. Tolkien liked to change all the time. In fact, he even changed the Lord of the Rings at one point. I think that it actually changed from one edition to the next when they reprinted it. He actually changed a couple things. Going in, that's what we're going to work with, that none of this is actually canon. So any of you people out there who think you know everything about Middle-earth and all of the little... you don't, because even J.R.R. Tolkien didn't, so you can stop it. So I am in a group with a bunch of buddies. We chat about comics and painting minis, which I have to get back to as I look over here and see all of my unpainted minis. And we just talk about all kinds of stuff, and just stuff that we like, stuff that we don't like, general conversation. And one of my buddies put up a video by these two guys, and I guess I'll link it, but I watched 11 minutes of it and it annoyed the crap out of me. It's two guys talking about the Rings of Power. They had not seen all of the episodes yet. They had talked to a point, because the episodes were coming out one at a time, and you know, unless you're going to wait for the whole thing to come out and then talk about the whole thing, which I think you should do when it comes to a series, is wait for the whole thing to come out and then pass judgment. They didn't. They were a little premature, if you will. All right, the first thing that they talked about that annoyed me right away was the Harfoot. By the way, spoilers if you haven't watched the show. Oh dear God, put a big banner. Spoilers if you haven't watched the show. Please go watch the show. Please go watch the show. They talked about the Harfoots and how they didn't really like how they were portrayed, because apparently they were mean. Now, two things going on here. One, they called them hobbits. They're not hobbits, they're Harfoot. They're different than hobbits. They're the predecessors to hobbits. We all know that, at least from Gollum. And I believe Gollum is actually more closely related to these guys than even Bilbo and Frodo are, because even Gollum lived way before even they did. And these guys are nomads. Now, I don't know if you know anything about nomads, but they can't wait for people. And that was a big gripe. Well, they're all this love and happy family, and they're all close-knit, and they all, but they still leave people behind. That's what nomads do. You have to move in order to survive, and the weakest one gets left behind. Just is what it is. We're going to stop there. We're not going to go any further on it, because they're not fucking hobbits. They're a completely different thing. So please stop referring to them as hobbits. They're a different thing. Fucking move on. A lot of people seem to forget that the Second Age and the Third Age are two very different times in the Tolkien world. And the reason why the Second Age is the way it is sets up the Third Age. The Third Age, let's go back to this, is quite literally the apocalypse. They are survivors of the apocalypse that is the Second Age. So everything that was done here was forgotten over here for the most part. Okay, there's some elves that still exist, but for the most part, everything that happened here was forgotten here, because it's apocalypse and things were destroyed. Books were burned. People forgot shit. It's not great. And if anyone has ever written any D&D lore or done a D&D campaign, it's like, oh, this sword is so awesome. They made it 1,000 years ago, and then, and they can't make it anymore. And how do you explain it? It's a whole big thing. But how J.R.R. Tolkien is explaining it is basically everything got destroyed, and then the Third Age happened, and things were forgotten. things were missed. I don't know. A bunch of people died. Like, people who knew shit, who didn't write shit down, got smoked. So that goes on their second point of, oh, well, I don't like how we don't really know much about these people because everything was lost, okay? These people were nomads, and then at some point, they settled down and they became homebodies. I don't know if you know who Bilbo is, but he's a bit of a homebody, but he's got a little bit of adventure in him, and then that's how the Hobbit starts and the whole saga begins. Okay, that's that point. The next point that they like to get into is they don't like Galadriel as a main character, as the main character. Here's the point to that. She's the main character because she's also in the Third Age. She makes it through. She's literally been there from like time immemorial. She was in the East, and then they came across to Middle Earth, and she was there, and whole thing, okay? She's been around. She saw the trees destroyed by, what's her name? Shelob's mom that ate the one tree, okay? This is a whole big thing. That's why she's the main character, is that she's the thread that goes through the entire story. Now, what she did, what they're doing with her, did she do all that? Well, we know a couple of things, I guess, just from based on what he had written already, but we also don't know if whether or not that would have changed because he died and he stopped futzing with it. That's one thing to note, by the way. J.R.R. Tolkien is a futzer, and there's nothing I can't stand more than a futzer. Just leave it. You wrote something good, just leave it. But he didn't. Now, why? That sounds like I was about to do a walk-in impression. Why would you not like a woman being, a main character? Hey, you're talking to my guy all wrong. It's wrong tone. Do it again, I'll stab you in the face with a soldering iron. Impressions aside, why would you not want, or why would you not like Galadriel as the main character? Well, let's dig into that a little bit more. A lot of fan bases of fantasy has been really male dominated for a long time. And I'd like to point to evidence of Captain Sweatpants in Big Bang Theory as what people, for the most part, thought nerds were. So as myself growing up, being kind of shunned from both places, being like, I do love nerd stuff, but I'm also a jock. But like my sports buddies would look at me and be like, what are you, they would look at me like a Captain Sweatpants. And then I would go to like where the nerds are and they're looking at me like, I'm some just big dumb oaf. It's been rather male dominated. I think in a large part, women coming to the forefront is looked upon as, well, they're forcing an agenda on me. Because in Lord of the Rings, we had Aragorn, and we had Boromir, and we had Legolas, and we had Gimli, and we had Frodo and Sam, and it was all, and in fact, all these people who were like, oh, but the Lord of the Rings series is so good, and this Rings of Power series is so crap, why couldn't they do it like the movies? I remember the movies, and I remember them with Liv Tyler, with her a couple of scenes that she's in, freaking out that how could a woman do that's not her. It's Glorfindel. It's not her. I think it's Glorfindel. Not the point. Point is that they paid for an actor, number one, and number two, they weren't going to use her in a grand total of like 2 scenes, which if you read the book, that's basically what she's in. Okay? And she shows up like, and then she moves on. It didn't break the movie for me. I didn't care. Why you care? Beyond me. Shut up. Sit down. The point is, what I'm trying to get to is that for the most part, because they basically said, I'd rather have Elrod or I'd rather have Durin be the main character. Now, 2 things are a problem with that. One, Elrod hasn't been around that long. He's been around a long time, okay? But he's basically grandson or grand aunt or great aunt. Galadriel's basically his great aunt or something like that, okay? So, no, he's not around long enough. And Durin, while a fabulous character, and I love dwarves, and I always play dwarves, and I'm a fan of dwarves at all the time because they are passionate and they are, sometimes foolhardy, but they live longer than, humans for the most part, but they wear their emotions on their sleeve and they tell you what is on their mind, and they're hard-headed sometimes and stubborn, but they can also be super, loving and sometimes goofy. I love those characters. I really do. But they're not main characters. They have their own stories to play, sure, but there needs to be a thread that ties everything together. And again, we go back to Galadriel, been there since the beginning, ties the whole thing together. I also think what they're trying to do is not say the loud part out loud, which is they don't really like strong women and strong character women. Strong women characters. That's the one. It just eats at me because what do you give a hoot? Well, it's not believable. Really? What is believable? Van Damme, Arnold Schwarzenegger, the movies that we all, Schwarzenegger in the woods with some alien that can go invisible, okay, has heat-seeking technology, and yet he somehow just covers himself in mud, and that throws it off? If we're okay with things like, Total Recall and Universal Soldier, and if we're all cool with that, and if we're okay with Chuck Norris being able to just do whatever he wants, beat up 1 million people, and we're just like, oh yeah, all that makes sense, but an elf who's thousands of years old, who's had a ton of training, and but that's not believable. She can't ride a horse and cut off an orc's head. That doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. The point is, and like I said, I literally got 11 minutes into this video and I wanted to smack both of them so hard in the head that they would feel it for eternity. Just say the shit out loud. Just say it, man. You don't like the fact that there's a chick and she's the main character, even though she's one badass main character. She is. She's super angry. Her brother was murdered by Sauron. Okay? She's in constant revenge mode. She's pissed off. That is not lazy writing. That is a torn character. That is a damaged character trying to find something to latch on. And every step she takes, and you're sitting there like, oh no, don't do that. Why are you doing that? Why are you so upset? She's supposed to be. And it all comes to a head at the very end when she, spoiler, is face to face with Sauron. And he's like, you told me to do this, or you got this done for me, or you did that. I didn't do that. You did that. Because he manipulated her. She was easily manipulated, just like anyone would be if you were super upset all the time. As a whole, she's a great main character. Durin and Elrod are fantastic. Durin, the whole dwarven section, arguably by far one of my favorites. The Elven City too, where they make the ring and all of that stuff, really cool. I liked Numenor. I thought it was really awesome. Really got a nice little taste of what that would be, because Numenor is technically like Atlantis, I guess, in a lot of ways, and they obviously get destroyed and everything like that, but there's it's technology and they're advanced and all this other jazz. I thought they did a really good job, and I think the story as a whole, once you watch it in its entirety, really comes together well, and they really wrap it up in a nice bow. The trouble with series, and I think this is good for any series really, is that the first season is usually a learning curve. They're trying to figure things out. They're trying to get a foothold. And it's not until like season 2 or 3 or 4 where they really hit their stride. What you hope doesn't happen is what happened in Game of Thrones, where like the last season is just a complete like... And the last thing, obviously, is people of color in the world of... Why do you care? It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. Like at the end of the day, and you're sitting there going like, but it's not like the book. But the books actually talk about people who are in the sun and in the south, and they look different. And, these things are in there. And like I said, things are always changing. Relax and watch a fucking good show. Stop your bitching. Everybody wants more Star Wars content. Everybody wants more Lord of the Rings content. Everybody wants more of the stuff we grew up with. If you want something different, go make it yourself. Stop gatekeeping. People tried to gatekeep me in both of the worlds that I wanted to live in, which was loving sports and loving comic books and board games and fantasy and D&D. So enough. Move on. Get a new hobby. Don't like it? Don't need you. There's the door. Don't let it hit you in the ass on the way out. Moving on. All right. Last but not least, people are worried about the timeline. From everything that at least we kind of know, is that these events took place over a massive period of time. And the only characters that you could then cast and keep throughout this timeline would be an elf. All the human characters, you would literally have to recast every single episode. So the timeline we knew going in, and if you didn't know going in, I don't know, read a book, figure it out. The timeline was going to be skewed. We knew that. We knew it going in. It just, that's another complaint that has come up. The last thing that really gets me, and I'll just wrap it up on this, is the lazy writing. And I've heard it from everywhere. I heard it from these guys on this video, and I heard it, all over the place on TikTok and Twitter, which are just, super reasonable places to go to get reasonable ideas. It's not lazy writing at all. I think actually the writing is very good. One of my favorite things that happened was even the interaction between Durin and Elrod, where he's like, 20, 30 years might be the blink of an eye for an elf, but I've lived an entire life. He's like, I had a wedding, you missed my wedding, I have kids now, you missed their births, like all of this stuff, and you kind of realize what time means to elves and what time means to people who eventually will die. I don't think it's lazy writing. And to call a lot of stuff that's out there now lazy writing, I think is just lazy in itself, because you can't put into words what it is, or you can, and you feel you don't want to because, hey, maybe it'll be politically incorrect. Maybe it will, but say what you mean, man. Or if you don't have anything nice to say, shut the fuck up. Everyone likes to just critique. Everyone likes to just bash. At the end of the day, this is the stuff we as fans of fantasy have wanted for a very long time. I don't know if anyone remembers the 80s, but there was a lot of real life, stuff that they made, which was really terrible. I'm going to end this here because I'm going to go on an absolute tangent. Lord of the Rings is great. Lord of the Rings is awesome. Lord of the Rings is one of the reasons that I even know how to read and to spell. That's the nostalgia for me. My dad read me The Hobbit, and he started reading me Lord of the Rings. About halfway through, I was reading Lord of the Rings. So Lord of the Rings means a lot to me. Is everything perfect? No. But why does it need to be perfect? Shut up and enjoy. It's entertainment. Be entertained. Nerds, you whine so much. That's why people shoved you in lockers. Stop it. Not that that's right. That's it for me today. Remember, guys, whatever you're doing, wherever you are, whether you're playing board games, or you're playing hockey, or you're playing football, or video games, it's always game time, babies. Let's go!